Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is still Art Burns, and I am still excited to be here with you. You know, this podcast is where we talk about mindfulness, and we talk about a lot of concepts surrounding mindfulness, and I give you some specific practices in this podcast from time to time, and also we just talk about a lot of different ideas surrounding mindfulness. And so today I want to talk about something that's a very basic form or a basic concept of mindfulness, right? And sometimes it's really helpful to sort of, take a step back and say, wait, all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but let's take a step back and just pause for a moment and take a zoomed out view of things just for a few minutes, right? Because what happens is when we when we start talking about mindfulness, right? And this happens, I remember somebody, before I was even a mindfulness practitioner myself, somebody, brought up the term of books, right? And like she said, and this is the person who actually got me into this work. And she said, if you ever go into a Buddhist bookstore, she was like, thousands of copies of books, thousands of books that are all about the most simple concept, right? And that's the way this stuff gets, right? Because there's so many ways in which we try to express these terms and these practices and these concepts, right? We're trying to, conceptualize it so well so that we can communicate about it, right? And so when we do that, we tend to sometimes sorry about that. We tend to sometimes get to a point where we feel like we're overcomplicating things because of all the different words and all the different concepts and all different things that we're trying to communicate with each other, right? And so a lot of times it is really helpful to take a step back and talk about something very basic, the way these practices work. And so today I want to do something along those lines, okay? And this is really based on something that came to me this morning in a personal revelation, if you will. Okay, so where to start? so when it comes to the concepts of mindfulness, right? Again, it's a very basic, and I mean really basic concept, right? It's really, and actually I just got done talking to one of my amazing clients who's doing amazing work, and I mean really, like the transformation that I see in people is just such a satisfying part of what I do for a living. I mean, it really, yes, it's nice to be able to pay bills, but when I can see people change the way I saw this person this morning, I don't want to, I don't want to, I want to respect the privacy, so I'm not going to say their name, but you know who you are. We met on Friday morning, and when I see these changes in people, it is just so inspiring and so rewarding. And so one of the things that came up this morning in this talk, or one of the things that we mentioned this morning, was really the fundamental aspect of what mindfulness is, which is just paying attention. Like that's it. That's all it is paying attention, present moment, paying attention without judgment. And that's it, right? Now, of course, I just said that, right? That took 10 seconds to say, maybe less, right? 5 seconds even, right? And of course, there's so many clients who I've met with over the last few years where that's the real concept, right? But of course, if I just say that, what's that going to do, right? Everybody be like, okay, yeah, pay attention. I got you. Don't judge. Okay, fine. See ya. But of course it doesn't actually happen, right? That's where the practice comes in, because it's not something, even though it's the simplest, conceptually simplest thing that you can possibly imagine, it's not that easy because of the way that we conceptualize things, because of the way that we process things, right? And so that's why, this whole thing is based on this just supremely simple concept. But it's so difficult at the same time, because to get ourselves to live in this concept is the key, right? And that's why we do daily practice, right? There's no mystery to that. There's no complexity to that at all. It's literally, we do daily practice so that we cultivate, as I told my client this morning, what happens is we go from a state, right? When we go into our meditation every day, right? We enter a state of mindfulness, right? Where we're just paying attention to what's happening as it's happening, right? And we do that in meditation. Then hopefully if you work with me, you do that informally while you're brushing your teeth, while you're driving your car, while you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're eating, all those kind of things, taking a shower, all those kind of things, right? And then you're going to practice those things every day along with a couple of other practices that I give people. But eventually what happens is this goes from a state of mindfulness, right? But again, what is mindfulness? It's just paying attention, right? So it goes from a state of paying attention, right? But as we do it over and over and over, it becomes a trait of paying attention, where it becomes something more automatic. It becomes something more, ingrained in our personality, right? And so that's where we're getting to. That's the whole point of all this, right? To get to that point where it's a trait. But again, that trait is nothing more than just being attentive to the present moment in a non-judging way, right? But here's the thing, right? Like a lot of times, with a lot of things that we do in our lives, right? There's a general sort of process to things, right? We learn how to do something and then we're able to do that, right? So it's a process that ends, right? That's not the case with mindfulness, right? It's a process that kind of goes on and on and on in a way, because again, it's part of our personality, right? But it's much more in the sense of like, so like you can take guitar lessons for say a year, right? And you can become quite adept at playing guitar within a year, right? You can be able to play, thousands of different songs that you can, transpose and hear on the radio and stuff like that, right? You can continue to play that forever, right? But the thing is, right, that you never stop practicing. Right? It just goes from practicing that feels like, oh, this is such a hard thing I got to do. I got to, my fingers hurt. I'm not getting it. I got to sit here. I got to do this specific formal practice, right? It goes from that kind of thing to just picking up your guitar and playing. Right. And so this doesn't feel like practice because I'm just playing. I'm just enjoying myself. I'm just going through it. Right. But at the same time, you're practicing while you're doing that. Right? So mindfulness is very much that way too, right? It's not that we're ever done, right? It's not that, and a lot of times this is a thing that I have to sort of confront a lot, right? That I teach a 12-week program, right? So the concept there in most people's minds is that at the end of 12 weeks, now I'm mindful and I'm done and that's it. That's the whole thing. But it doesn't work that way. Right? It's a continuous, really a lifelong commitment to being more attentive to the present moment. And now from that, all the magic comes, right? And that's where all those books are about, right? Like that's what we write about, right? It's the, the wonderful aspects of health, the wonderful aspects of clarity of mind, the wonderful aspects of forgiveness, the wonderful aspects of compassion, self-compassion, all of it, right? Comes from that. Right. But really the practice that gets us to all of that good stuff is no more than just paying attention. It's really that simple. It really is, right? But now this is where it comes in though, that this is what I wanted to talk about today, is this notion of a moment to moment kind of course correction. And I know I've talked about this in the podcast before, at least I think I have. I talk about it a lot, so I'm sure I've put it up here. But the idea of mindfulness alone, right? And what we mean when we say moment to moment non-judging awareness, right? This is a very, very important concept, and please pay attention to what I'm saying here. If you take nothing else out of this podcast, this is what I want you to take out of this one, right? Life has a tendency to present itself to us in huge chunks of time. right? And even if what we consider is smaller chunks of time, like hour by hour, right? But really what we wind up doing in our lives is we look at life as year by year or month by month, season by season, maybe, or big events like the big holidays, right? Like, you got Christmas is out there, right? Do I have enough? Am I saving enough money for Christmas when it comes, right? That kind of stuff, right? We have this concept that we look at these big, we 30-year mortgage, right? 3-year terms on my car loan, or 5-year terms on my car loan, whatever it is, right? My year-long lease, right? Whatever it is, right? We have these tendencies to look at these really broad stretches of time, right? And when we look at things like that, right? The bills are due on a monthly basis. We get paid on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis. The seasons happen every 3 months. The Christmas happens once a year. Birthdays once a year. Like as we dwell in this concept of our lives as these big, huge chunks of time, right? That's where we get lost in it. Right? That's when we find ourselves preparing for something that's weeks or months or even hours away, but we're not paying attention to what's happening now, right? So in a very, very real way, right? Life doesn't happen the way that we kind of act as though it happens, right? Life happens moment by moment. And there's nothing bigger than that. Now, that doesn't mean that Christmas just comes around once a year. It doesn't mean that you signed a lease that is for 12 months, right? Like that, you can't tell your landlord, oh, well, I'm not paying my rent because it's a moment-to-moment existence, man. It's not like that, right? But the reality is that that's how life happens, right? Life happens moment by moment. And so with mindfulness, right, it's about paying attention moment by moment, and to just simply do so without judging the moment as either good or bad, right? Like that's the base concept, right? Now from that, kindness becomes available to us. Forgiveness becomes available to us. Letting go and accepting become available to us. Seeing things for what they really are becomes available to us, right? This is how it all works, right? It all comes from that place of just the ability to pay attention. Okay? Now, here's the thing, right? I like to look at it as a course correction. Right? Moment to moment course correction. I think I talked about this a few weeks ago on the podcast, but when I was young, I had an aunt and an uncle who were actually my father's aunt and uncle. So they were my great aunt and uncle, right? And so they had this sailboat, right? Nothing that fancy or anything, but it was a 35-foot sailboat. You could sleep on it and that kind of stuff. It was really, it was glorious to me at the time as a 8-year-old kid. It was like, it was like the greatest thing ever, right? But but it wasn't like a yacht or anything like that, right? But the idea though, what I'd like to tell you about this particular sailboat is that my uncle Sterling would always let me take the wheel, right? He had that big wheel with the handles on it, like typical ship thing that you see, right? And he said like you get to drive, right? And what he would do was he would say, okay, you see that White House in between the two sand dunes out there on the other shore, right? Do you see the White House I'm talking about? It's got a flag in the yard. You see that one? Okay, keep pointing to there. Right. And then eventually he got me to use the compass, right? To say like, okay, so you see when you're pointing right at there, you're at this compass heading, right? So you can also watch the compass and just keep coming back. Like if you drift here, to the right of this point, you come back. When you drift to the left, you come back, right? And so what I realized was that that's what and this was when I was 8 years old, right? So, I've come to realize this later on in life, but it's a real metaphor for how life works and for this sense of course correction, right? Later on, I was introduced to the concept that, that if a boat were to set sail from New York Harbor and bound for London, right? If that boat is even 1 degree off in its setting, right? 1 degree, is going to, by the time you protract that over the entire Atlantic Ocean, 1 degree doesn't put you a few miles off of London. It puts you in like Spain, right? Like you're completely off, right? By just 1 degree. Right. So it's not like you have to lose yourself in it. Right. You're just 1 degree off, and look at the difference in your destination. Right. In the outcome of what's happening. Right. So in that sense, it's not about, it's not about this big, huge change that we make in our lives that we're then done and everything's different after that. Right. It's about monitoring ourselves moment by moment and seeing, like, am I being mindful? Am I paying attention? Have I drifted a couple of degrees off? Let me come back. Am I being compassionate? Drifted a little bit off. Let me come back. I catch myself. I'm not being compassionate in this moment. So my compass setting is off by 3 or 4 degrees. So now all I have to do, very simply, is just bring myself back. Okay. Now I wanted to bring this out specifically where it comes to, and I know this is a basic, a little, get back to the basics here, but I want to go to a little bit of an advanced concept, which is how this applies to forgiveness. Right? Forgiveness is one of the most powerful tools that we have, right? The ability to forgive others and to forgive ourselves, not or, but and to forgive ourselves, right? Is one of the most powerful tools that we have to living a life of comfort and ease and happiness, right? Because forgiveness is about letting go of this weight that this event or this person is causing, right? But it's not the event or the person that caused the weight that we feel. Like when we feel like when forgiveness is needed, generally speaking, we feel weighed down by the emotions of whatever non-forgiveness looks like, right? So whether that's anger or whether that's spite or just holding a general grudge of some sort, these things are heavy for us, and not just feeling like, they're actually physically on a cellular level, they're damaging you very, very strongly. Like really, I tell you the story about the doctor in New Orleans, right, who works in the burn unit. Now, I'm just going to repeat it real quick in case anybody didn't hear it before. This doctor worked in the burn unit for many, many years in New Orleans. In the burn unit, right, people who find themselves hospitalized because of 2nd or 3rd degree burns, right, there's almost always, like almost 100% of the time, there's somebody to blame for this, right? It's not just a sickness that you got. It's not just a condition that developed, right? It's actually somebody did something or somebody didn't do something you were supposed to do, which would have kept you safe. Or you yourself did something wrong that caused this injury for yourself, right? But there's always somebody to blame. And so this beautiful, wise doctor, right? This guy, I don't remember his name. I really should. I should have his name tattooed on me because he's my hero, right? What he did was he went to, over the course of a few years, like hundreds of patients, right? Every single patient who came into the burn ward, right, that he was responsible for, he would sit down for their initial consultation. And in their consultation, he would invite them and ask them to have some forgiveness for the person, right? But this really specific here, right, that he said very clearly, having forgiveness for the person who's responsible for you being here, even if that's yourself, having forgiveness for that person doesn't mean that you don't get retribution, right? It doesn't mean you can't sue the person for legal damages or for monetary damages. It doesn't mean you can't press charges to put that person in prison if they've broken a law, right? Like, these two things are independent of one another, right? And so forgiveness is about yourself. Right. And what this doctor found, this is mind blowing, right? Now, a lot of times when there's 3rd or 2nd degree burns, they do this process called a skin graft, right? Where they cut away that part that's burned, right? They take skin from another part of your body, a healthy, undamaged part, and they just patch that skin over, right? Well, one of the challenges to this process is how well your body's going to accept it, right, in that spot, right? Because your body has to kind of reach out and say, okay, yeah, I'll take this, make the tissue heal and form and stuff like that. And what this doctor found was that over hundreds and hundreds of patients, right? Those patients who were willing to forgive the person who was responsible for where they are, right? That those people who were willing to forgive took the skin grafts at a 1-to-4 ratio, meaning the people who were unwilling to forgive had to have 4 different trials of that same process versus 1 for the people who were able to forgive. Right. So that's an illustration for how much this is really affecting your body. Right. It's not just about how you feel. It's not just about your mood. It's like, again, on a cellular level, it's destroying your body to not forgive someone. Okay. But here's the thing, right? Forgiveness is very much like mindfulness in the sense that, or I mean, it's part of mindfulness for sure, but in the sense that it's a moment-to-moment course correction, right? Because it's not just like forgiving someone and, okay, I'm done with that. Okay, move on. It doesn't work that way, right? Forgiveness requires over and over repetition. It really does. And that's the only way it happens, right? Again, just like, the moment to moment, course correction of mindfulness, right? It's a moment to moment course correction of forgiveness, right? And of course this is going to happen, bigger in some circumstances and smaller in others, right? Like it's much, it's a much quicker much quicker process to forgive someone who just cut you off on the road who you're never going to see again, right? It's a much different story if you're struggling like I am with a personal issue with your parents, for instance, like I have, my father, I've worked very hard to forgive him for things that have happened in my life that have caused me a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, right? And again, I told you this, like you would never believe the environment that I grew up in. Like to think that I'm doing this right now, like it's almost impossible to think of it. And I look at it, I'm like, how the heck did I wind up like I am? Because coming from that environment, it was like if there was an opposite of mindfulness, that's the home I grew up in, right? Like it was so far, but maybe that's why I was attracted to it. Anyway, the point is though that I have a lot of resentment, right? I have a lot of resentment for some of the things that happened along the way. I have a lot of resentment, but I say resentment because the resentment is what arrives from the pain, right? So really what I should be saying is that I have a lot of pain, right? I look back at the little boy that endured such an emotional desert and such, honestly kind of cruelty in some ways, right? And I look back at that boy and I feel for him, right? And I feel his pain on such a visceral level that's what calls resentment in, right? That's what makes me think like, gosh darn, F you, how did you do that to me, right? But that's the thing, right? Like forgiveness, right? Like I can't go back and change what happened, right? As Jack Kornfield says, forgiveness is giving up all hopes for a better past, right? Because I can't change the past, right? I can't go back and change what happened to me. I can't expect my father to change. I mean, he's 70 something years old now. So I mean, he is who he is, right? So I can't expect him to change either, right? So the only thing I can do is for my own benefit, I can forgive him, right? Because the resentment, right, when I'm driving down the road and I'm reminded of my father and I feel that resentment, right, what that's doing is that is pulling me away from the attention to the present moment. Right? Because now I'm paying attention to, my childhood memories and my emotions that are coming from this whole thing, right? And I'm lost in this whole big, ugly, black mess, right? And I'm not paying attention to, who's around me, who, I say I'm just, dazing off while I'm driving my car, but maybe something's on the radio that I really needed to hear and I'm not paying attention to it, right? More likely, maybe my kids are sitting in the car with me. I'm not paying attention to them because I'm paying attention to this thing from my past, right? And so the point is that this has pulled me away from mindfulness. But yet, I've already forgiven. So how does this work, right? Like what WTF, Well, the fact of the matter is that forgiveness, like mindfulness, is also a moment-to-moment course correction, right? Because forgiveness, again, forgiveness for somebody for making a bad coffee or cutting me off on the road or my kids not putting their shoes away or something like that. Those are very, that's forgive once and you're done, right? And that's good. But something that's an ongoing, something that's it's a very powerful, aspect, a very big aspect of something from my past, my childhood, that thing that makes me who I am, right? That is not going to go away in a snap of a finger. That is not just a one-time forgiveness and I'll move on, right? That is a constant moment-to-moment course correction of forgiveness. So when I find myself thinking about my father and I feel that resentment as it manifests as a tension in me, that's where it comes for me. For you, it might be different. For you, it might be a headache, it might be a ring in your ears, it might be a heat in your ears. That's something else I get. It might be a back pain, it might be a stomach thing. Who knows what that is for you. But that's where paying attention comes, right? We start to identify that's the feeling of resentment, right? So when I get that feeling of resentment, for me, it's a tightness in my chest is where it starts. As soon as I get that, if I'm paying attention to it, as soon as I feel that, well, now I can forgive again. I can return to forgiving, right? I can keep on forgiving, right? It's a process. It's a moment by moment course correcting process to forgive. And so I invite you to kind of consider that and consider times in your life where, or people in your life that represent this difficulty, right? And keep forgiving them. Right? Don't think of forgiveness as just something that you do once and it's over, right? It's like, okay, took the medicine, it's done, right? Doesn't work like that. And so I invite you to consider something in your life that needs forgiveness. Consider that thing in your life and see if you could commit to giving that a moment-to-moment forgiveness. See if you're able to do that. And let me know how it works. Okay, I would love to hear from you. I'm going to drop my link in the comments as I always do. If there's anything you would like to ask about forgiveness or moment-to-moment course correction on any kind, right? Because it's not just forgiveness. It can apply to a lot of different things, but forgiveness is a big one, right? If you have any questions about any of this that I've talked about here, the link below, it's a coaching session that already belongs to you. Okay. All you got to do is click on the link to claim it. It's free, right? It already belongs to you. You've already owned it. So just click on it. If there's something you want to ask me specifically, click the link. If you'd like to learn more about how to forgive, click the link. If you'd like to learn some of the basic practices, like, I haven't listened for a long time. I'm really interested in some of these basic practices because it sounds really, appealing, all this stuff that you talk about, and I want to live the way you describe, click the link. All right. So I'll talk to you when you schedule your appointment. All right. Otherwise, I'll be back in tomorrow on Saturday for another episode. All right, everybody. I wish you well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope you're all managing to moment to moment course correction for yourself and for your own ease and your own happiness. All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching. Talk to you soon.